Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to go over my round 2 game from Zadar Open, and with this game officially the two worst tournaments of my life are starting, and I'm going to cover all the games from them. It's hard, but I mean always when I lose a game and then record it on the channel, it feels better. It's sort of a good vent to let it out, and I didn't have the opportunity to do so yet. So yesterday I covered the round 1 game against a player rated 1000. That game I won. This is round 2, played the next day. On day 2 of most tournaments in Croatia we have a double round, so it could be quite exhausting, and more importantly your result on day 2 could decide the pairings throughout the rest of the tournament and your overall result and performance. So this was quite an important game. I played an opponent who's very tricky. I found some of his games online during my preparation, and I saw that he defeated an international master from my club a few years ago. He has had a break from chess. I don't think he's been that active for the last few years. So anyway, he usually plays modern Pirt's King's Indian defense type setups with either d6 g6 or d6 c6 g6 and eventually e5 or c5. So I knew that I could expect some form of that. I didn't want to go d4, which is my main opening now with white, because I'd expected a normal King's Indian, and I saw some of his games against the variations which I like to play, I didn't want to get into them, so I played e4. And I expected the modern or the Pirts, but the modern more so just g6. And he went for the Caro-Kann, which I was surprised to see, so I had a think here. I stopped for a few moments and I had to decide what to do. I almost played the Breyer with d3, which I thought would confuse him. But I don't know it that well. I know the ideas, but I don't know the exact move orders, and sometimes a bluff can be called. So I just played d4. And he surprised me with d6 here, but I was more comfortable now because I knew that we were going to play a King's Indian type setup rather than a Caro-Kann, which I'd been preparing for, even though I have more experience against and with the Caro-Kann. So here I played c4, which is the only logical move, grabbing space, and here he played e5, which is a move I've seen before and is a move I usually play against when I face the Pirts and my opponents play the early e5. So it's the same position, just without these two pawns having been played. And doesn't make a big difference, so let me show you that. So if this happens, the best move is knight f3. You don't take on e5, even though you can trade the queens off. But I've had a few training sessions I've trained a bit during a few training sessions in the positions when the queens get traded off. And usually black is supposed to have a slight edge, but I couldn't understand why, and that's why I worked on Berlin endgames, Pirt's endgames from that position, and I realized what the problem was. Usually when the exchange happens, white has already developed his knight to f3 and or his other knight to c3, which makes it harder to play f3 and c3, which makes it harder to defend your central pawns and makes it harder, more importantly, to defend your b4 square and your g4 square. So strategically, I thought that it would be fun to go for such a queen exchange here because I had some training and some ideas of what to do in those positions, so I decided to take. He took, queen takes, king takes, and I went knight c3 because my pawn is already on c4. Notice that I don't want to play knight f3. If I play knight f3, my e4 pawn is going to be in trouble. What I want to do is play f3 eventually. And what you are going to notice, which is one of the things I was studying, in sort of Maroczy bind setups or setups where one of your bishops is trapped behind its own pawns, what you do in these queenless middle games, or not endgames, middle games, you leave the knight on the side of the bishop you want to develop on its original square to be able to play g3 or b3 and then bishop a3 or bishop h3. And that I thought was a very good way to develop and solves a lot of issues I used to have in positions like this. Because the first time I played this, I played it against an international master in a blitz tournament. It was a Pirt's endgame, and I lost, even though I had quite a good game, and I couldn't understand why he would go for that, and only then I started realizing that black is supposed to be better there. So bishop e6, bishop e3, I want to develop as soon as possible, bishop b4, and here is, well, the consequence of him not castling and me already having developed my bishop and my knight. I can now castle with check. He went king c8 and I went king c2. What you never want to allow is for your pawn structure to get ruined, because without the queens on the board, it's going to come down to strategy and positional play, and with the ruined pawn structure, it would be much harder for me to play. Knight f6, and now the importance of not having played knight f3. The first advantage is I can go f3. Otherwise, if I go, I don't know, bishop to d3, I'm blocking my rook, and he could always take my knight and then threaten the e4 pawn again. So you basically don't want to allow that. Here he played a weird move. If I were him, I would have played knight to d7, to b6, or to c5 eventually, or maybe immediately, or bishop to c5. He went knight a6, but that's fine. He can go bishop c5 now, which he did eventually, but I think knight to d7 just gave him more options. And here I went a3, bishop to c5, bishop takes c5, knight takes c5, b4, and I'm expanding, grabbing space and securing the b5 square and the d5 square some more, which is important, and which is something I relinquished later for a specific strategic reason, which I'm going to talk about. Now, in this position, he went knight back to a6. Again, I think knight d7 is a better idea. And here I went for g3. Now you can see why, what's the second reason why I wanted to leave my knight on g1, so that I can now go bishop h3. For as long as his king is stuck on c8, he has to trade the bishop off. And if his rooks ever get to the d file, if I can develop in time, I'm going to be faster to grab it. He went rook d8 here, and I went bishop h3. Note that rook takes rook doesn't work, because bishop takes bishop is check. So if he takes, I take on e6, he has to recapture, and once he does, I take, probably take with the king. Although I'm not sure, and this position is positionally, I would say, almost winning for white, because the only problem I have is my f3 pawn, which could be tended to with king e2 and then king e3. I have no problem on the dark squares. And then eventually my knights are going to get to one of these squares and put pressure on his pawns, and it's going to be overwhelming pressure. After bishop h3, he went rook e8, which surprised me, which has to be a passive move. Has to be better to take. Of course I took. He took with the rook, and I went knight g to e2. And now I managed to get what I wanted. I have a solid position in which I'm looking forward to the f4 break. Eventually I want to double up my rooks on the d file. I have the d file for now. That's the downside of having played rook e8, rook takes e6. He doesn't have rook d6 now. And he still has to develop his weird a6 knight. He has to move it away somewhere. Okay, here he went king c7, which I can understand. I went rook to d2. He went rook to d8, which now again gives me an opportunity to take with tempo. So takes, and I'm sorry, to develop with tempo, rook d1 check. And here he played knight to d7, which is another decision I don't really fully support. What I wanted to do with what I would have done with his knight was probably something like knight to g8 and knight to e7, and then playing for f5. Because if he doesn't play for f5, I don't see where he gets activity in this position. And here is what decided the nature of the position. Here is a bad strategic decision I made. So, and this is funny, I've just finished work on something involving the knight on the 6th rank. Yesterday I was working on that and throughout the week. And this involves putting your knight on the 6th rank. So creating an octopus knight, a monster knight in the middle of your opponent's position, is a huge strategic advantage, often enough to win games. And often a knight to be able to come to the 6th requires an outpost. To be able to create an outpost, you need to have a pawn which is able to support your knight. So here's what I saw after knight d7. I decided to use my chance, and I saw this knight maneuver. Knight to a4, knight to b2, knight to c4, knight to d6. If my knight gets to d6, I'm probably going to win. Of course, if the knight cannot be captured. Now I have two problems, which if you've seen some of the games where the knight does get to the 6th rank and is supported, often freeing up a square and creating an outpost is done in one move, hence the move c5. So that was my plan. I wanted to go c5, knight a4, knight b2, knight c4, knight d6, and I thought that was a really strong plan. Now, there are two downsides to this plan, one more important than the other, but both important. The first one is, after c5, I'm leaving two squares unattended, or for now, the d5 square is defended by my e4 pawn, but after f5, it's not going to be defended by my e4 pawn. Or I'm going to have an isolated e4 pawn. And the b5 square is completely undefended. And if I ever go a4, then my b4 pawn is unprotected. So an easy way to exploit that for him would be simply knight c7, knight b5. Not now, because I would take with my knight, but eventually. Okay, so those are the two downsides. And as soon as I played, okay, and the first downside. The second downside is he can undermine my outpost with b6, and there's not much I can do about it. If you look at his position, he has three attackers on c5. Once he plays b6, I only have one defender. That means I have to capture. That means I've played c5 for nothing. If I have to trade it off, and I've given up two squares. So if you think about it logically, I've wasted a move to undefend two squares, which is stupid. So c5 was a very stupid move, and I regretted it soon afterwards. He went knight c7, of course, knight a4, king e7, knight b2, I'm going for my plan, rook f6, attacking my f3 pawn, I went rook d3, and now he went b6, a timely pawn break, and I have to take. C takes, a takes, and now you can see that c5 was a very bad move, because now b5 is undefended, and b5 and d4, and I'm going to be in trouble. Knight c4, b5, which was a weird decision, which I do not understand, and I was happy to see this move because firstly it takes away the b5 square from his knight. Secondly, it gives me a square. So what did he do with the move b6 to b5? He undefended c5. So again, I see knight maneuvers, knight d2, knight b3, knight c5. If my knight gets into c5 and can be recaptured by a piece, ideally another knight, then I'm laughing. So let's say I trade up the rooks, bring one of my knights to b3, the other knight to d3, and then play one knight to c5. That would be a good position. Here I went knight e3, instead of that, because I saw a threat, and I wanted to go knight g4. I wanted to dislodge his rook, wanted to trade off rooks, and then wanted to bring my knights back into b3, d3, and exploit c5. However, it was too slow. If you're wondering about the f3 pawn, it's not hanging. He would lose the exchange. If rook takes, knight check, he will have to take. And I'm not sure if this is enough to win, but it probably is enough to win because my pawn structure is quite solid. I would be able to blockade the e5 pawn with knight e4, and it would be a pleasant enough position. But after knight e3, of course, he saw that. He didn't do that. My other threat, along with knight g4 and trading of rooks, my other real threat was knight f5 check, chasing the king back and finally playing knight to d6. So he played g6. I went knight g4, rook e6, knight back to e3, rook back to f6, knight back to g4, and rook back to d6, offering a rook trade. I wanted to force that. He is the high-rated player, so I knew he wouldn't want to draw. And once I trade off the rooks, I was going to go for my knight maneuver into c5. Knight back to e3, whoever takes the rook. So it's sort of whoever blinks first. Why would you give up a square for your king? Here he went knight e6, and now I have to take the rook. If I don't take the rook, he's going to play knight to d4 and have a pawn on d4, which I don't know if he is in time to protect, so this may have been the wrong decision. Let's just see if I play something. Knight takes, pawn takes, knight moves somewhere. Where does the knight move? Let's see here. Yeah, he would have probably had enough time to protect. Probably c5 immediately would be okay. Probably. Yeah. Okay, but after knight e6 I didn't want to allow that, so I took with the king, so now he has a better king position. I have to waste a move to move my king, whereas he recaptured. Here he went knight g7, finally what I thought he was doing, going for f5 or h5. So I went g4, which again undefends some squares, particularly the f4 square, but I wasn't really worried about that, because for as long as I keep my knight on e2, that's not a problem. Knight e6, h4, and here indeed he does play knight f4, so I have to take that. So I take, he takes, e takes f4, and now if I go knight g2, which may seem like a normal move, putting pressure on f4, he can just go king e5, and I don't really want to allow king e5. Then again, if I move my knight someplace else, he's going to go knight e5, putting pressure on my f3 pawn. And I have to do something about that. So my decision was to play knight c2. Why did I play knight c2? Because if knight e5 comes, I want to be able to play king e2 with keeping control over the d4 square in case his knight moves and his king tries to wander into my position. So this seemed like the most useful move. And here, after knight e5, king e2, knight to c4, of course I'm already slightly worse. And the position is objectively probably equal, and it's hard to say why black would be better, but it's just easier to play for black. Even though he has doubled pawns, I have a very weak pawn on f3, which he can target easily by playing knight to e5. Furthermore, he is already putting pressure on my a3 pawn, meaning my knight cannot move, and if my king moves, he can go back to e5 and put pressure on f3. And I have no counterplay, or no easy counterplay. So I played king d3, and here he played an excellent move, h5, which, again, may not be the best engine move. And by the way, I did not check out this game with an engine, nor will I. I'm trying to analyze all of my games without the engine. This may not be the best engine move, but it's very tricky and it's hard to answer. So if I go g5, which may seem natural, I think I would eventually lose the game, because now, along with f3, I've created a terminal weakness on h4, which just cannot be defended. There's no way to defend this. So if I ever leave my f3 pawn unattended, I'm going to lose the game for sure, because he's going to have an easy target on h4. So instead of that, I chose the lesser evil. I took on h5, and after g takes h5, now at least if his knight ever comes into my position, then I have time to do this and take his pawn. So that was the idea here. After g takes h5, that's exactly what I did. So I'm in trouble here. If I go king d4, which may seem like a natural move, knight e5 wins the game. So king d4, knight e5, I would have to go knight e1 probably, and now I don't know what he does. He can probably just put me in Zugzwang somehow, or force my king away with something like d5 takes... No, stupid. It loses a pawn. Well, he can probably just wait, and I don't know what to do. Eventually, he's going to go knight to g6. Or maybe he can go knight g6 immediately. Okay, knight g6, knight g2. I still am defending, sort of. So I might still be holding on, but I thought that was horrible. Okay, after gh5. I thought king d4 couldn't be played. And I chose the move knight d4. Why did I choose that? Well, I would be happy to give away my a3 pawn if he wanted to take it, because if knight a3, I have knight f5 check, and let's say, well, not king e6, because that loses h5 with tempo, but let's say king e5, knight to g7, and eventually when his knight wanders back, I'm going to take here and have some counterplay. Okay, but after knight d4 he didn't take, he played knight e5 check, which is a better move, king e2. Now knight back to c4, and now I did play knight f5 check, king to e5 and knight g7. And in this position he thought he had gained something, but he really did not, because after knight takes a3, of course if I take on h5, I'm losing because of knight to c2. I'm just going to lose my b4 pawn, he's going to queen. But after knight takes a3, and this is a position I'd considered before playing knight d4 in the first place, I can just go king d3, forcing his knight back to c4. So after knight c4, I take on h5, and we have the same position as if that had happened originally without him interposing knight e5 check and knight back to c4. Here he went knight d6, I went knight g7, he went king f6, and I made a stupid decision. So since I drew far too many games in Zagreb, I drew 5 games out of 9. I just did not want to draw. I didn't want to draw. And I wanted to fight. I had about 45 minutes on the clock, so enough time to think. I wanted to fight, and even though it was sort of drawish, and I understand that this is now an equal position, now that I've traded off a3 for h5, I still wanted to try to find the win. So the way to draw this is to go knight h5, putting pressure on his pawn. He has to go king e5, and I just go knight back to g7. If he doesn't do anything, then h5, h6, h7, and queen. Okay, and it's not, well, there's basically no way to avoid the draw. Now, the way to play for a win, in my mind, was knight f5, which I ended up playing. I saw that it was still equal, but I thought that he could go wrong. So what I thought was, if he takes, and after I've analyzed the game for the first time, I realized this too was a draw. So knight takes, pawn takes, king d4. I thought during the game that this was easily winning for me. So let's say king g6, this was my calculation. King h5 takes. But yeah, this too is just a draw, as you can see, and if anybody's better, it's black has an extra pawn, but it's going to be a draw. So after knight f5, during the game I thought taking is impossible. My opponent thought so too. He didn't take, he played knight c4. And after knight c4, the reason why I played knight f5 was I wanted to trade off b6 for c6 for f3. I thought that was going to be a good trade, which turned out to be, well, maybe not the wrong decision, but it led to a tricky position for me. Okay, so I went king d4, he went knight e5. And now, as I said, as soon as I play king d4, knight e5 wins my f3 pawn. But king c5, knight f3, king takes c6, he went king e5, which I like, which is a good move. And here I blundered. In this position, I don't know if it's completely equal. I would bet it is. Here's my analysis of what I think was the best move. h5. After h5, I was expecting him to go knight g5 to stop my pawn from coming to h7, and I was going to take on b5, and then king takes e4, knight h4 to be able to sacrifice on f3. Let's say either f5 or f3. f5, king to c5, f3, knight takes, I think was better. b5, f4, b6, knight e5. Eventually he's going to stop my pawn. I would go h6, f3, h7, f2, h8 queen, and f8 queen, f1 queen, and this would be a draw. And this was my calculation of what was probably the best move. The fact that black is a knight up I don't think is relevant, because I can either give him perpetual check or maybe even queen my other pawn if he's not careful. So this is what I'd analyzed after the game. Instead of that, I played a losing blunder, which loses the game on the spot. So the position is probably equal. After my move, it's dead lost. And I took on b5, completely missing the winning move for black. If you want to pause the video, find black to play and win. Okay, the winning move is knight d4 check. And it's completely over. It's busted. Since he gave up my f3 pawn, he's going to queen. And that's it. So whatever I do, I'm losing. If I take, he takes, I go king c6. He obviously queens first, and this is winning. If I move my king away, which I did end up doing, to c5, then what happens is knight takes, e takes, and f3, b5, f2, b6, f1 queen, and you can guess what happens next. This is busted for me. So 2 bad decisions. The first one was a practical decision, deciding to fight in a game that was objectively equal because of my previous results, and that's a thing I need to stop doing. So chess games are unrelated events, and I should be able to see each game and play each game as if it were the first game I ever played. And my decision making should not be influenced by my previous games. So if I hadn't played Zagreb Open the week before, I would have drawn this game, won some points, everything fine. So yeah, that's something I need to work on. And the second mistake was tactical. With a lot of time on the clock, I just blundered into that check and lost the game. Congratulations to my opponent. He played a good game. He fought on. I mean, we played this equal game. He declined the draw with declining the repetition. Then I declined the draw with declining the repetition. So we both wanted to win. He won. So good for him. Congratulations. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to continue with some more games from Zadar Open. Hope you liked this one. Hope it was instructive, even though it had a less than ideal finish. Let me know what you think. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.